So this video is actually going to be a slightly different type of video. It's actually going to be a debate with a friend of mine, Zan, from the Star Wars community, one of the Star Wars communities. And we're going to be debating the role of the Chosen One in the galaxy. What does the Chosen One represent? Why does he represent that? And the functions and mechanics. And it's quite a long debate. We did start kind of halfway through the debate. I started recording, but it lasted for an hour and a half after that. We did loop back over some points that we touched on at the beginning, so you should get the full picture of the debate anyway. But it does start kind of in an abrupt sort of place, bear in mind. But I think we really got to the bottom of some crucial points in this debate, some crucial points that often go unnoticed in the community that aren't really talked about at all. We've linked everything to philosophy, to Daoism. We talk about the mechanics of the Force, the living Force, the cosmic Force, all that sort of stuff. So stay tuned if you want to hear all about that. And yeah, hope you enjoy the debate. Keep in mind as well, this debate is just a rough discussion. It's not a scripted debate. We haven't written notes or not, and we are just going off the bat here. We didn't even really plan to record this. We were just going off the bat, and I thought, hey, this is good content, so I started recording. So, but anyway, yeah, enjoy the debate. Of your inner state, it's that whole convergence of the Force on Mortis is also the fact that he can interact with all of that on Mortis is proof that that is the that exists within him too, because that's amplified and he can interact with that, right? Does that make sense? So
yeah, the mental state, the ability to sort of rise to that level of like mental power and clarity, that definitely exists within him. And in the Revenge of the Sith, you can say that is the sort of mental state he's in. But I think with respect to how it translates to his power, like the power he's actually able to use in the moment, I think on Mortis he's drawing from, like I said, a convergence of all of the Force, including the meta realities of things, which is like the higher level of things, right?
mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people have a problem with saying Revenge of the Sith Anakin is more powerful than Mortis Anakin, because they don't want to say that Anakin in the normal world can like ragdoll like the entirety of the dark side and the entirety of the light side converged into like two beings.
Yep. So
Which
the whole thing is, right, so you said it yourself, Mortis is a conversion. It's a convergence of the power of the galaxy, right?
Yeah.
So the power that the ones represent is the power in the galaxy, right? And
yeah.
the goal of those people in the galaxy, like the Sith, for example, is to embody that power, right?
Yeah.
So those Sith, and that's why they say, one second, that's why they say in the Mortis arc that only the Chosen One contain both children, because the Mortis gods are still embodiments of the energy that exists elsewhere, which the mortals can embody. So that's the way they can embody that energy through it, because it's not just there on Mortis, it exists everywhere else, and that's what they embody in that confined space. But those mortals can also do that as well, because they say it themselves. The mortals are exploiting the power of the ones in that episode. So it's
I think
in the episode.
I definitely think there are tons of things in the Mortis arc itself that make the Son and Palpatine very similar. There's tons of shared lines in terms of their motives throughout. Yeah, the Son's motive throughout Mortis and Palpatine's motives and actions throughout the entire the two trilogies. They're very similar. They're very aligned. And so I've long thought that there's definitely some sort of connection between the Son and the Son and Palpatine. But I don't think that necessarily applies to Dooku, and there's an angle where that's true for sure. But so I don't think that like applies to Dooku, for example. Like I don't think it can be the case that if you want to say Sidious embodies all of the darkness in the galaxy the way the Sun does, I don't think you can say Dooku does as well. I think that
Sun doesn't necessarily represent the darkness in the galaxy. He represents the untamed anima within Anakin. So there's the anima, pneuma, and Aperion. The Aperion's the father. The pneuma, the tamed light side position, the stance in the Force, the light side stance, that is the daughter. And the son is the untamed power, which, when not channeled through the pneuma, goes out of control, which is why they both grow out of the way of the father. So,
Right. I agree. It's both it is a reflection of Anakin's inner light and his own inner darkness for sure. But I think it's simultaneously a reflection of the galaxy's darkness and lightness. It's both and, you know.
yeah, and that's fine.
The
That is because Anakin is the embodiment of the Force, and that's what you're seeing is a reflection of his
Right. I
mind.
agree. I agree. But I also think that um, in order for it to also be a reflection of the entire galaxy's dark and light, it can only happen on Mortis. There can't be one being who like fully truly embodies that.
Do you not think that
Um,
that is the point of the Chosen One, and that's what makes the Chosen One unique, and that's
I
what the
think
Father is
the
interested in
point
the
of the
Chosen One.
chosen one, the point of the chosen one is to defeat Palpatine, right? At the end of it's to defeat Palpatine and restore balance.
Not
And
necessarily.
I
The prophecy that misread could have been.
I
But
suppose.
the idea there, that line means that the Jedi don't necessarily know what balance means, right? And Lucas says this, and what balance really means is that the Jedi need to die as well. Because the brighter the light, the darker the shadow. They've gone past the point where they're meeting power with power, and power meeting power doesn't work. So the stronger they are, the stronger the Sith are. So they both need to die. So Anakin is not necessarily just someone who needs to destroy the Sith on behalf of the Jedi. He is not just being tested, he's the test itself for the Force. He's there to see who will win Anakin over. Will he be drawn to the dark side? Will he be drawn to the light side? And the clouding in the galaxy is a metaphor for the clouding within Anakin's mind, which the Jedi have put there. Palpatine says you need to break through this fog of lies the Jedi have created around you. Anakin needs to break through this fog. That's the clouding. And that's why Obi-Wan can go into oneness versus Grievous in the novel when Anakin has a moment of clarity. That's literally directly connected. And so it's all linked to Anakin. It's that is the point of Anakin. He is also the axis mundi that is meant to align all these powers, and it's mirrored in George Lucas's novel Willow. He wrote a sequel trilogy to Willow, and Elora Danan is the balance. She's the exact same character as Anakin, and he draws a diagram of the Force which matches Plagueis' diagram, Book of Sith. Don't know if you read this in Meet Anakin Respect thread. But it's exactly the same, and it shows Elora Danan in the middle. And when you translate that to Star Wars terms, it's Anakin in the middle. He's the Axis Mundi that's meant to align all of this stuff by being a test for the Force to see who wins over Anakin. And the Sith need to win him over first because the Jedi need to die. But then he also needs to be redeemed through Luke redeeming him. So he needs to see the light, and he brings his own internal balance back to the light. And that's how he can defeat Palpatine's hold over his mind and throw Palpatine down the thing and kill Palpatine, because Palpatine's only alive because he's Vader's the host for Palpatine. Palpatine is like a cancer on Vader, so as soon as Vader removes that eclipse and lets his light shine through his love as for Luke as the catalyst, he can bring himself back to balance and therefore destroy Palpatine and bring the Force back into balance. So it's all about what's going on within Anakin, which is fundamentally the exact same thing that's happening on Mortis, which is why the Father says you can do it again for the galaxy, even if he's not a Mortis. Do you agree?
I think this is true, but it can still like it is not contradictory that in the real world, Anakin would not be able to literally ragdoll an embodiment of the Force that totally and actually represented all the Force in the galaxy, as well as his own inner states. Right? It's in the real world, Anakin. It is a. I agree. It is a test for the Force, right? It is to see if Anakin can cling to the light. If Anakin can cling to the light side wins. If not, the dark side wins, right? But I don't think I mean, there's a couple things. I don't think it is. I think the phrasing that the Jedi needed to die is inaccurate. I think it's inevitable that they would have died based on like
Well,
their trajectory.
how
But
do
I
you
think
go on, carry on,
I
sorry.
think, for example, if Qui Gon had defeated Maul on Naboo, I think the Jedi would actually probably have survived because um, um, the name of that soundtrack there is Duel of the Fates, right? And I think Lucas comments on that. They're fighting for the fate of this boy, but as you're saying, the fate of this boy is the fate of the galaxy, right? So they're
Exactly.
battling over that, and Qui-Gon losing there, it's the Duel of the Fates seals Anakin's fate to me. And so that after that, it is true that the Jedi are going to die. They just don't know it yet. But again, I still think all this is I think all this is true. At the same time, anakin anakin the light side does not have to win by creating someone who can ragdoll something like the son and daughter in the real world. The light side the way the light side wins is by defeating Palpatine, right? The ulterior the main thing is for the light side to win,
What
and the
does
main thing the light side wins is by defeating Palpatine, because Palpatine, if he wins, will enslave the galaxy forever and it'll just be plunged in darkness.
but if you look at what
Because Palpatine's
Palpatine's
victory means that Anakin does not redeem himself, right? So sorry, I should rephrase. The ultimate test for the light side is to redeem Anakin, right? Because in redeeming Anakin, you can defeat Palpatine, which defeats the dark side. But the main thing is, can you redeem Anakin from the dark side? But that does not require Anakin to be as powerful as he was on Mortis, because on Mortis, he was also feeling this tremendous like convergence of the force, whereas in the real world he's still making this
but
tremendous
in
decision that
but
requires that sort of clarity and that sort of willpower and mindset,
but
but he's not necessarily having to use like he's not
I think he
necessarily
is. I
that,
think he fundamentally is, because bringing balance to the Force, the whole thing with bringing balance to the Force is that you are controlling the entire Force and forcibly bringing balance to it from a central point of convergence. And that is the whole point of Anakin as the chosen one, is that he does represent this point of convergence and that he
but
can
the
bring balance to
central
the
point
Force
of
from within
convergence.
himself, which is why it's a test for the light side to redeem Anakin ultimately, because he's that central point of convergence, which brings the entire bringing balance to the Force just
Yeah,
means
I agree.
forcibly bringing balance to the Force, controlling all of its energies. So
I agree.
fundamentally, if you agree with that, you need to agree with the fact that Anakin's inner power is the entire Force, and that Anakin shifting his inner power to the light side brings balance to the Force, which in turn means that you need to agree that Anakin's inner power is yet the equivalent of Mortis, a convergence of all that energy.
I think Anakin being the linchpin doesn't have anything to do with like how much power he can draw on in that moment. Anakin is the linchpin of the galaxy because his fate determines the fate of the
Well,
galaxy.
so it's all
But
interlinked
it that,
because
that doesn't have it's Anakin fulfills the chosen one prophecy despite the fact and it fulfills the chosen one fulfills the prophecy and balances the force, and the light side wins despite the fact that he became much weaker than he was at his prime, right? So to me that's sort of proof that this whole thing, and it's true that Anakin could have become immensely powerful, perhaps at his full potential. He was as powerful
can I
as he
stop you
could be
there
on
real
Mortis.
quick? Because that's important.
Yeah,
Because it's the inner state that he changes, which is his chosen one power. And it's that power that he can no longer unleash into the living force. He can't use that because he's crippled, right? But that inner state, that inner power, the Hyperion, the cosmic presence, is still there within him. All that's changed is that he can't use that to. He can't harness that, but he's still got that cosmic presence, which is the important Mortis presence that exists within him. So what I'm saying is that KFV and Zonikin, that is when he's clarity enough to remove all the barriers from around him and let that inner power out. But he can't do that as Vader, but that doesn't mean that he can't shift his inner power. That doesn't mean that his inner power isn't still there. It says in Revenge of the Sith,
I
it's like a painter gone blind, a composer gone deaf. It's still there, but he just can't do anything with it except for his internal state still shifts the galactic state, but he can't harness it in the living force.
Yeah, again, I really do agree with that, but I think my point, it is true that Vader still has that cosmic presence, and because of that, he still has this, as you say, like a painter gone blind. Still has this trace of power. He just can't call on it. But the fact that the battle of the dark side and the light side, and the fact that the chosen one prophecy can be resolved despite the fact that Anakin cannot become someone who can actualize that power in
He
the
doesn't
real
need
world,
to.
right?
He doesn't need to, right?
Vader
Because it's within
well,
him.
exactly.
It's the
That's what
power.
I'm
It's the
saying, right?
convergence within him.
Vader in Return of the Jedi doesn't need to access that sort of power in order for the light side to win. All he needs to do is love Luke, right? And that's all he needs to do. Is love does provide him this boost of energy, this surge of determination, but it isn't necessarily like
It's
the
not.
same thing as it is on Mortis, where he's drawing on like a massive convergence of the entire force.
It's that. It's that
It's
thing
it's
exactly because it's
metaphorical.
that. No, it's that thing exactly because it's that massive convergence of the entire force within himself that he can't harness, but he can still change through his mental state, his position in the force. So it's that inner power that still exists within him that he shifts, but he can't use. But he doesn't need to use it to change it, right? He just needs to change his posture in the force. So his pneuma aspect, his mindset needs to be changed. And that's the posture that changes that convergence within him. Does that make sense? He
Right.
doesn't need to
So
use that.
the fact that what everything hinges on in the galaxy is his mindset changing, to me means that Anakin's full potential, or as how powerful he is in the real world, is not necessarily what it is on Mortis, right? It's metaphorically the same thing, because on Mortis, concepts and these sorts of things are embodied in people like the ones, right? It is on Mortis because like the entirety of the dark side and the entirety of the light side, all of that is embodied in these two people. But in the real world, I don't think is strictly true. The fact that Anakin is the linchpin, and what the light needs to win is love. That's all that the light needs to win, love. Because Vader is, as you say, he is unable to draw on that power, right? All he needs is love. The main victory of the light side has nothing to do the main victory of the force has nothing
Okay,
to
so
do
think of
with
the love,
how much
right?
power he's able to
Think of the
draw in the
love.
moment, but whether or not he's able to, whether or not his love is able to overpower the dark side.
Exactly, and that's the connection to Luke is the only way. The love is the only thing stronger than the dark side's hold over you. So his love for Luke allows him to make that mental realization and get rid of Sidious's hold over his mind, which allows him to
Hmm.
kill Sidious
Yeah,
and embrace
yeah,
balance within himself,
yeah,
which balances the force, right? So
yeah.
fundamentally, by agreeing with all of what you've agreed with, you have to agree that that inner convergence is within Anakin outside of Mortis. That has to be fundamentally true because otherwise he
I,
wouldn't be
but
able to. It's one thing saying that, yeah, fair enough, he can't use that power as Suit Vader. He can't bring that out of himself. That's not what I'm arguing at all. But as
yeah,
Suit
for
Vader,
sure.
he still has that within him to the capacity that he's still a convergence of the force no matter what he can bring out of himself and use as power. So his position as the
Yeah, I
chosen
agree.
one remains, right? Yeah. So
I
that's the
agree. Anakin is always a convergence of the force, but I don't think he's a convergence of the entire force in the real
why
world.
not?
He is a
Because bringing
big
balance to the
convergence in the
force
force.
means one thing and one thing only, and that is harnessing the entire force and forcibly bringing balance to it. So how can he bring balance to the entire force if his inner self is only a small capacity of that, a small
Well,
portion
because
of that?
it's not about what his own inner capacity is capable of, but what he's capable of doing, like what his actions are capable of doing, how he's able to help people, right? That's the whole thing about being Jedi. It's about helping people, right? By helping people, that is being on the light side. That is the light side winning, right? What matters is not his inner capacity and how much he's able to TK ragdoll, for example, but how much he's able to love, right? And so
Well,
to
the
me,
love is only a catalyst for his redemption. It's not a it's not a fundamental process of balance in the sense that it's not. It's a catalyst for him to realize balance, and balance is the surrender, the complete release of self and ego, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's the love. His love for his son makes him realize that. Well, I think it's a couple things. One, the fact that he just saw Luke resist the dark side. Right? He didn't think that was possible. He says to Luke, "It's too late for him." And then he sees Luke do it, and then he realizes he loves his son. And then he realizes, wait, if Luke can do it, I can too. And that's why. And because of that, he's able to give up his own life, a selfless act, and defeat Emperor Palpatine, right? But that doesn't have to do with his inner capacity. The light side winning doesn't have to do with his own inner capacity with respect to his power, but with respect to his ability to love his son, and whether or not that's
So
enough to defeat his ability to hate himself.
so the light within him is the light of the galaxy, and the dark within him is the dark of the galaxy. So that dark of the galaxy's got hold of the light within him. They say the fire within him, the
Oh,
furnace
wait,
of
wait,
life.
wait. Can I stop you there?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I think you can't just assert that the dark in him is the whole dark in the galaxy and the light in him is the whole light in the galaxy. I think they represent the dark in the galaxy and the light in the galaxy. And I think that the fate of the light and dark in Anakin is tied to the fate of the galaxy. But I don't think it's necessarily the same thing literally at every level. I think everything we're saying can be true without
So
it being the case that they're literally the same thing, and that means Anakin is the
okay.
entirety of the Force,
So when we
rather than
talk
just
about
being a metaphorical representation.
so when we talk about the convergence of the force, we're talking about the convergence of the energy. And when we think about the dark side in Star Wars, emotions are energies. So all of that dark side, all of that energy, think of it as waves, that all converges of Mortis, and that's what the convergence means. So fundamentally, Mortis is a convergence of all that energy. And you've already agreed that the convergence within Anakin is the same as the convergence within Mortis. So how do you think that is distinct?
Well, I think they're the same in that they reflect the fate of the galaxy and the fate of the Force at large, because Anakin's fate is intrinsically tied to the fate of the galaxy. I mean, in that deleted scene, right? I think it's Bane or Revan who says to the son, "He who controls Skywalker will control the galaxy." Right? That's referring to, will the dark side control Anakin, or will the light side control Anakin? Whoever
Exactly.
wins, they will win the galaxy. That brings balance. But you know, on Mortis, in order to bring balance, you need to literally be able to ragdoll the living embodiments of the son and daughter of the dark side and light side, right?
And
All of the dark side converge in one place, and all of the light side converge in one place, and those do reflect Anakin's inner state. In order to bring balance in Mortis, Anakin needs to be able to ragdoll both of them. In order to bring balance in the real world, Anakin doesn't need to do anything as crazy like that. All he needs to do is love. But that the
he needs
power
to do
that
that from within himself, because remember, it's
right, but the
all a
power, the
reflection.
sort of the mental clarity and the mental willpower and the mental state needed to needed to be able to do that in both instances, that comes from the same place, right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't necessarily mean it's the same power itself, right? It's about the mental state. And then in Mortis, because there's also this extra factor of the convergence of everything in the universe in that one place, because of that mental clarity, he's able to use this tremendous convergence of the Force. In the real world, the mental clarity allows him to break free of the hold of the dark side, something that Yoda said was impossible, and then defeat Emperor Palpatine, right? But he doesn't need to ragdoll the son and daughter in the real world in order to overthrow Palpatine. He
But
just needs to be able to pick Palpatine up and put him down, more or less.
we've already established that the son and daughter are reflections of Anakin's internal state. So by bringing
But they're
balance to
also
himself,
reflections of the galaxy, right?
So is
They're
so is
both
Anakin,
and.
but so is Anakin.
Yeah, they are, right? But that means, but they're not necessarily like literal representations of Anakin's inner darkness
Why
and
not?
lightness in the way that they are said to be a literal representation of all the force in the galaxy,
Why not? Why are those three not the
divided into
same?
two people.
Why are those
Huh?
why are those three things not entirely synonymous?
Well, because I don't think we have any outside of the evidence that you've cited here. I don't think we have any reason to think that Anakin is capable of that. Right? There's no evidence that Anakin is actually able to use the full power of the Force. And I feel like in order, the only evidence that exists is the evidence that you cited. And so, if you wanted to make it the case more likely that yeah they are literally the same thing, you'd have to point to some other evidence that shows Anakin being that good, but there just isn't any.
What would that
And
good
so
be?
and so
What
one sec, and so the main thing to me is that in the Mortis arc the ones are stated more than anything they are, I think we're inferring that the fate of the ones are representations of Anakin's inner darkened light. But
Mhm.
more explicitly, it's stated in the episode that they are the dark side and they are the light side, and that's what the viewer is left with
Within
most
Anakin?
explicitly.
They are also told that the dark side and the light side, in the same episode, that you're told that they're a reflection of the life force around them, and that they reflect the life force of the entrant to Mortis. So that those three things are entirely synonymous. But why do you think that what is being that good? When you say that we don't have any reason to believe that, when you're the crux of your argument lies on essentially everything everything can be true, but Anakin just doesn't do anything that good to show that he's. But what classifies that good?
Anakin
Because
does
if we,
do something that good, though. And the thing that Anakin does that is that good, that is the real world reflection of his cosmic weight and destiny, is that he is able to break a hold of the dark side because of his love for his son and defeat Emperor Palpatine.
and thus
That's what he
controllably bring
does that is
balance to all
so
the
good.
force's energy, and thus forcibly bring balance to all the force's energy through
Right,
within
but that's
himself through
that's as a
betrayal.
consequence of his actions, right? It's like a chain reaction. He, in defeating Emperor Palpatine, he frees the galaxy from oppression, thereby
Mm,
preventing the dark side from having a hold over the galaxy in the future.
more like free through freed himself from the dark side, he is able to defeat Palpatine, which in turn gets rid of the entire dark side in the entire universe. Because it's
Well, but
the primary thing, the source
the
is
way that
him.
Sidious sustains the dark side throughout the galaxy is through the Empire, right?
It's
Because
through
the
Anakin.
Empire isn't there, the light side is able to come out again, and the Republic is able to form again.
Yeah, it's through the Empire, but it's also through Anakin synonymously. And it's like the kind of way you look at God, like if it rains, it's like, oh, it's God, like it's God's like actions. It's this higher power reflecting itself on this more in this more refined way. And it's the same thing with Anakin's inner state. It's through Anakin and his mental domination of Anakin through fear that that is a metaphor of his domination of the universe through fear. It's through domination of Anakin, who literally thinks the Emperor is God until Luke convinces him he's not. But it's the mental hold which is synonymous with the whole of the over the galaxy. So it's through Anakin that Sidious controls all of this, which links back right to the deleted scene. He who controls Anakin controls the
Right.
universe.
Yeah. Right.
So
So Emperor Palpatine controlling Anakin, though, that just means having Anakin on the dark side. And or in and the light side having Anakin, that was, the moment Anakin turned to the dark side, the galaxy fell, basically. Right? That was it.
yeah,
Before that, it was light, but it was just slowly leading to this inevitable conclusion because Qui-Gon Jinn failed. Um, uh,
because because it was down to the Jedi who had strayed from the will of the Force and who would
Right.
inevitably cloud Anakin and thus cloud the galaxy.
Right. But the reason why Anakin is like the root of all this is because he carries out Order 66. Now, Anakin doesn't have to be able to ragdoll the son and daughter in order to kill all the Jedi in that temple the way he does. You can imagine that it's just a really, really, really powerful Jedi. Or sorry, Sith Lord, a really, really, really powerful Sith Lord walks into that temple with an army of clone troopers behind him, and he defeats all of those Jedi. Right? He does not have to be this guy who's able to literally ragdoll
Well,
the son and daughter, and that's because Anakin's importance in the cosmic force and like everything that signifies in the real world, it manifests as a reflection, as a consequence of his actions. Whereas on Mortis, it manifests as his literal actual power. But in the real world, right? I mean, think about what Star Wars is, right? George Lucas is inspired by like Daoism heavily, right? And what Daoism is about how to live a good life, right? And so if you're gonna make this, relatable to viewers, what the Star Wars is fundamentally is how to live a good life. And that is best seen by Anakin's actions, by the choices he makes, rather than him being super insanely powerful the way he is on Mortis.
but also, if you look at what Taoism is, the Tao is one and the Tao is within you. So oneness is within you. The Force is within you. So that's the whole thing, right? It connects to Anakin because when he releases these mental clouds, which is what Taoism's all about, release of self, right? And complete surrender to let go. It's through releasing all that that Anakin can draw on that. And I think that when you say that he doesn't have to be this guy that ragdolls the son and daughter to march through the Jedi Temple and do the same things that he does. For one, Fact Files says that Subaslik. For one, Fact
What's up?
Files says.
You should check out this guy Sparky's tier list in chat.
Oh well,
Hang on, we're having a good conversation.
yeah. But for one, Fact Files says that when Anakin turns to the dark side, he cuts off and eclipses the Jedi's connection to the light side of the Force, right? So he's already weakening the Jedi when he goes through and kills them all, for one. But also, I think by getting into that, you're kind of separating the mythology and spirituality in which Star Wars is based on, and which the Anakin's role as the Axis Mundi rests upon. You're separating that, and to try and separate it from the spirituality, from the concept that Anakin represents by saying he's doing this there, but it's deeper than that, right? Because like I said, it's like how God works. It's kind of like through doing that, that's what brings this on. It's not necessarily like no one else could have done that because no one else represents. You know what I mean? It's hard to describe because
Yeah,
it's like the fourth dimension
I
stuff
get
and God and
that.
all
I
that,
get
but
this
you know what I
idea
mean?
that I get the idea that nobody else but Anakin could have done what he did, both in the real world and in Mortis. Absolutely, I totally get that. Certainly, Luke cannot do it. He is not the chosen one. Absolutely. Um, but what Anakin does in the real world, um, if you okay, so to bring it back to Taoism, right? If you say in Taoism, if you're supposed to let go of yourself, right? But Anakin isn't letting go of himself as Nightfall Vader or when he's killing Dooku. He's embracing his anger. In fact, he's embracing his self, like embracing all this anger and rage within him and using it, right? I think that is the
The
fundamental
Revenge of the
thing, right?
Sith
The
novel.
reason why.
The Revenge of the Sith
I,
novel says
Right.
that
So
everything.
here's the thing
Go on,
though.
go on.
In the Revenge of the Sith novel, this is something that even Dooku has on a lesser scale to Anakin, absolutely, because the writing for Anakin is just so flowery and so beautiful. But if Dooku, what Dooku has going for him is that he's the axis of the universe, and he wills the Force, right? He bends the Force to its knee. But how can it be true that Dooku? That's essentially what Anakin is doing, right? He is bending. He is that in if you in the Stover novel, if you take that literally as you're doing,
Okay.
how can it be the case that Dooku is doing the same thing as Anakin, but Dooku is not Anakin? He's not Skywalker. He's not even a Luke,
Yeah.
right?
Okay. Yeah. It's because there's three fundamental differences between what the dark side does, what the light side does through balance, and what Anakin does through embodying the balance. So there's two different things between there's reaching balance like Jason Solo does, and there's being the balance. Now there's a fundamental difference there because being the balance decides what balance is. And as I said before, the Jedi need to go too. And so that's his decision. What Rott's novel says is that everything that he could do, everything that he did was the right thing to do because he decided to do it, because it was him who did it, right? Because he
Yeah.
represents that he is the balance. He's not surrendering to a higher balance and flowing with it. He's deciding because it's whoever wins him, which is whoever deserves him, because the Force is figuring out which side needs to go. And eventually, obviously, it's both sides. But where that gets into Dooku is that the dark side has a similar effect, but not the entire. It's more of an effect of oneness. It's more akin to surrendering to the balance than it is to actually being the balance. Although it is more rooted in control, like Anakin, in a sense, because what the dark side allows you to do is the dark side is essentially oil with the Force is water, right? So it rises above it. It's a cancer on the Force. So it controls the Force in the same way that a cancer controls the body. It's not necessarily, it doesn't represent the whole body. It's not controlling the whole body. It doesn't decide everything, every movement. But it does control the whole body because it is a cancer. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I think
And that's how
again to
Dooku's
bring it back to
different to
to bring it back to Taoism, the dark side is the opposite of being uh living a Taoist lifestyle, right? Because in when you use the dark side, you're self-possessed. You have the dark side is the result of attachments, right? Attachment to worldly things, attachment even to yourself, right? And so because you have attachments, you get fear that leads to anger, but you know the whole thing. But again, because it's about attachments, right? Attachments, if you just leave it at that, attachments doesn't have anything to do with how much power you're able to use in the moment. It's about whether or not you have the mental discipline and the clarity, or if you're even able to let go of fear and let go of attachments in order to reach this higher state. A lot of people can't do that, and certainly if the dark side were real, like in our real world, a lot of people would be unable to break free of the dark side and let go of all that, etc. But the fact that Anakin can is so miraculous, right? That is the light side winning. That is the destiny of the chosen one. It doesn't have to do with how much power he can use, but how much he can love.
Well, the
And
whole
because he can love, right? It's his choice. Letting go of attachments is a choice you make, right? It's something you have to be
well, the
able to do
attachments are
yourself.
those walls around your spirit, which Taoism teaches to let go of, right? That's what those
Right,
attachments are.
metaphorically, in the Force, that is what's happening because the Force is a reflection. With respect to everyone, the Force, their connection to their Force is a reflection of their own inner state, right? But in Anakin's case, his connection to the Force is so massive that it actually just is a reflection of the whole Force. But it's not the entire Force itself bottled up into. It's not necessarily the entire Force itself bottled up to one person. right? Because Anakin doesn't need to be the entire Force bottled up into one person in order to bring balance to it. All Anakin needs to do to bring balance is to make a choice, and that's to let go of his attachment, to let go of his
But
fear, and to be
you
selfless.
do understand through the Taoist lens what that means, right? Through that love. That love is merely a catalyst for a mental shift towards balancing that inner power that exists within him. So it's not that
Well,
he
and in
just
Tao, in
needs
a
to love and it's just the love. The love plays a part in a bigger role in Taoism. To love is essentially the love for all things, which allows you to let go. It's not a power in itself, it's a thing that allows you to let go, to surrender to a higher power. But Anakin represents that higher power. You know what I mean? So it's the
well,
same thing.
to me,
It's
this is in some sense, it's a lot like like karma, like the Buddhist concept of karma, where it's not that in letting your love in your love being able to let you surrender or let go of things, right? That is what surrendering is. It's not that somehow you intrinsically gain acts like it's more so that because you're able to let go, good things will come to you because you don't live a life ruled by fear anymore,
sure, but
because you
it's
no longer
different
make
when you
actions ruled by anger,
But it's different when
right? So
you
in
are
Star
the balance, when you are the power that you're letting go to surrender to. This is all fine when it's a regular person, but when you are a representation of the balance, you need to look at it through that lens, because you have to merge the Taoist philosophy with the Axis Mundi concepts and all that shamanism stuff that Star Wars is also based on. So when you interlock those things and look at it through all the lens, you have to look at it through Anakin is that power that you're surrendering to. So the love is merely a catalyst for transformation in his inner state to unlock that catalyst, to unlock that massive convergence of the Force. Do you understand that? Do you get what that means? Because it sounds like you're agreeing with everything I say, but just disagreeing with the stance itself, whilst agreeing with every single mechanic that leads up to my stance being correct. So it seems like you agree with me entirely, but are set on this
I
stance, which is
I just don't agree that the way in which Anakin is a representation of the Force has to be literally the Force balled up into one person. I think his story is a representation of the Force. His destiny is a representation of the Force. His fate is a representation of the Force. It's a representation of the fate of the galaxy. He who controls
exactly, it's a
Skywalker
mirror
controls the
of the whole
galaxy.
thing. It's a mirror of the whole
Right, but
galaxy.
it's not. Right, but the mirror, right? The mirror is not the object itself. When I look in the mirror, I'm not. It's that's not myself. I see in the mirror. It's a reflection of myself, right? It's not the real. It's not a literal me, right? If it were another me, like I could reach out and touch myself, that'd be fucking
But
crazy. But it's not.
when it is
It's
literal, physical, tangible energy created by everyone converging in one point, then it is.
right. So that's the Force is not all converge in Anakin in the real world, though, right? Like
It is.
you're saying that within Anakin exists all of the Force,
Yeah.
right? But outside of Anakin, the
Exists the
Force
Force
is
as well.
distributed, and
Exactly.
right? So outside of the Anakin, the Force exists as well, and Anakin is part of this ecosystem, this galaxy where the Force exists, and everyone is contributing to the Force that exists in the galaxy through their own, existence, right? And so is Anakin. But how can it be the case that there's the whole Force? There's what you're saying essentially means that Anakin has the whole Force, and that somehow, and but then in addition to everyone else, there's outside of Anakin, there's two times the whole Force, more or less. Do you get what
Well,
I'm saying? Like,
the Force can flow through many places at once. Think of Mortis. Mortis is a convergence of the whole Force, but it still exists outside of Mortis. The Force planet is a convergence of the entire Force, but it still exists outside. Korriban is the convergence of the entire dark side, but it still exists outside of Korriban. So the energy can flow like a web. The energy can cross and intersect at those points, and it's still part of the whole web. But it still exists.
But Mortis is the only place where the entirety of the Force flows through. Or notice, right? I think one important thing is when Anakin and Obi-Wan and Ahsoka, they go to Mortis. I'm pretty sure at the end of those 3 episodes, when they get back to the galaxy, no time has passed, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is the entire Force flowing through one entire. Mortis is the only place that is like that, right? It is true that Korriban is a convergence of the dark of the dark side. There is a lot of the dark side there, but it's not the entirety of the dark side, right? If you do the math, right? If you, for example, just for the sake of argument, if you are able to assign a number that quantifies how much dark side someone has and how much light side someone has, and how much that contributes to the Force that is in the universe, in the main universe of Star Wars, you could calculate how much Force there is by adding up all the numbers of all life in the galaxy, right? But what you're saying is the number that represents Anakin is the same number as whatever the sum is. But that doesn't make any sense, right? Like Anakin...
Go ahead. It does, because you have to look at it... It's a weird mystical binding energy which clearly can flow through multiple places at once, right? So that in itself is proof that it can flow through multiple places at once, which entirely kind of defeats your point that Anakin can't be this because it exists externally as well. Because if
it can flow in multiple places at once, but it cannot flow in its entirety in multiple places at once, right? That's why when they go to Mortis, time, like nothing else is happening in the galaxy. It's like when it comes to time, it's completely separate because it's the entire Force contained in this thing that's completely separate from the rest of the universe. The Force... there's in a way, Korriban and Coruscant and all the planets in the real world, they're connected by the Force in the universe. The Force,
the living Force.
Yeah, that Force does not connect Mortis to the main universe, but Mortis is nonetheless a reflection. It's a convergence of the whole Force.
Okay.
Yeah, right. So what I'm saying is, if Mortis, if you would do the math, add up all the numbers, it is equal to all the Force in the galaxy. But there cannot be.
So, yeah, I get exactly what you mean.
Right, but so yeah, right. Well, so it's basically like it's in some sense it feels a little bit like circular, right? In order to how can it be the case that there's all the Force in the galaxy, but then Anakin also has all the Force, but then actually all the Force is defined by Anakin plus everyone else.
Okay. Yeah. So that gets into the distinction between the living Force and the cosmic Force, because obviously the son and daughter and everyone are they're a reflection of the state of Anakin, which in turn is a reflection of the living Force as well as the cosmic Force, but primarily it's the Force that flows from all the living things at that point in time through Mortis, right? So I think I'll phrase this. So flowing through Mortis... I need another Benjamin rip. Yeah, what you're getting into...
to talk about this shit, dog, I gotta be so stoned.
What you're getting into is just the difference between the living Force and the cosmic Force. And I'll tell you what, do you want me to do a little write-up for you on that? Because I've been recording for the last 20 minutes because this is a good topic conversation, because I want to narrow down on a lot of these points. So I'm gonna write something up for that, because off the top of my head, I'm very stoned. It's very complicated.
Sure. Well. I do have to run soon, anyways. But so let me just leave you with this, and then you can write. Yeah. You can write, and then I'll read it. Let me just leave you with this. When it comes to thinking of it as like the cosmic Force and the living Force, the cosmic force is the force that connects Mortis and the entire universe, right? Because the fate of the force is the same in both Mortis and the real universe. But the living force is a reflection of the life energy that exists in those
Yeah.
respective realms. The living force is a reflection of what happens in Mortis only, and the living force is a reflection of what happens to in the real world only, right? Um, because there is that distinction, right? Anakin, when he goes to Mortis, the power in the living force that he's able to feel, it's super, super dense compared to, say, the living force that's in the galaxy. So
That's
when
because it's
he,
convergence. But I think
right,
that's
exactly,
I
exactly,
think
right?
that's divergent from your point. I think that more agrees with me, but the angle that you're looking at with the cosmic force and being outside of that, that gets into an entirely different thing from the convergence of the energy that both that is the crux of balance essentially, which is the living force
Well,
energy,
well,
which
just
is
to clarify,
dependent. Go on.
I do disagree that it is divergent from my original point, because I mean, to tie it into my original point, if you think about the living force as those numbers, those pesky numbers I was talking about, you know, the living force that is in Mortis, right? It's way denser. So essentially, it's like Anakin is like able to like draw on more numbers at once and exert that much
Yeah,
power,
yeah.
right?
But
It's
think
not
about it
that
like this.
dense.
So that dense power is embodied right in the son, daughter, and the father. Would you agree there? That dense convergence
I
of
would say it's
power.
embodied. I would say it's embodied in the son and daughter. Yeah, I think
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
father. I don't really think of the father as a being with power. He
Okay,
is a
yeah, yeah.
concept, really.
Yeah, yeah, let's forget about the father. So the son and
Sure,
daughter embody that
sure.
power that flows through there, right? So,
Yes.
fuck, where was I going with this? Fuck's sake. But what was your point again? Remind me.
um, my point was more or less that the cosmic force is what ties Mortis and the real universe, and the living force is contained to their own respective realms. And essentially, the power that Anakin is able to use, right? Like when it comes to how much he's able to TK or how much he's able to push someone by, that comes from how much he's able to use the living force, right? The cosmic force has to do with prophecy, and it has to do with the future, and it has to do with the currents of the force. The living force is about the energy that he can draw, and the life energy that he's able to draw in the moment. That's why when he's so angry, he's so powerful, because he's exuding so much hateful life energy. But in Mortis, because the light side is sorry, because the living force is so concentrated, when he sheds those mental barriers, he's able to tap into all of that living force that surrounds him, and it's all contained on just Mortis compared to the entire
Okay, but
galaxy.
Anakin doesn't shed those mental barriers on Mortis. That's what the father wants
Well,
him to
he
do. To
right. That's what
control
he does
that
when
power.
he.
So he can control that power. He can control the son and daughter. That
Yeah.
convergence of power. From he doesn't have to use he doesn't have to use their own power to tame them. He can use his own power to tame them. And that is the entire point of the trial. That's what the father wants him to do. So
Right, yeah.
that's the point of
So
it. But Anakin
Anakin,
doesn't actually do that though, because you said that Anakin, when he frees himself, can control all of that, and freeing himself allows him to control the Nexus. It's not that freeing himself allows him to control the Nexus. He can control the Nexus without freeing himself. That's an alternative to freeing himself, which can have freeing himself would have the same result, which was the father's intention there.
so sorry. So what I think you're saying is that Anakin, um, whether he submits or asserts his dominance, is doing effectively the same thing. In the context of trying to
Prove that
bring
he's his own one.
balance to Mortis. Sorry.
Yeah. In the context of proving that he is the chosen one, and proving that he's the chosen one is consistent throughout everything. Being proven that he is the chosen one is what proves that his control of the entire force. So
yeah, I agree. There's actually one of my favorite lines in like all of the Star Wars stuff I've read is from the Attack of the Clones comic, where I think Mace and Yoda are talking, and they say, I can't remember the exact scene, but I think basically they say that only if he chooses to be, only if Anakin chooses to be, will the prophecy come true, or will he be the chosen one, etc. So it really is all about Anakin's choice. But to speak of how that choice manifests, right, in both Mortis and the real world, the choice manifests as it could be either submission or asserting his will, right? On Mortis, he asserts his will over the son and daughter, right? He achieves this mental clarity that allows him to do that on Mortis. And on Mortis, he's able to do that because the living force is so dense, it's so converged into one place.
but
In
he
the
doesn't
real
have
world,
mental
the
clarity.
mental clarity lets him break a hold of the dark side, of the fear that's been plaguing him, of his own self-hatred. And he submits. That's a selfness, right? He submits to the force, achieving the same thing,
No,
but he doesn't. Even prior to that, prior to him fulfilling the prophecy in Return of the Jedi, in Revenge of the Sith, the force is not concentrated there. So even I don't fully agree that Anakin as a Sith Lord is able to sort of do the same thing as if he was able to submit. But even if he was, the force isn't so converged there that he's able to do it.
but
Sorry, the force
why
isn't
would
so
why would
dense there and convergent in the real world
if
that he's able
Lucas
to do what he did on Mortis.
so if Lucas says that what he did on Mortis, no, if Lucas says that what he did on the Invisible Hand was proof that he is the chosen one, and we know that proving that he is the chosen one fundamentally means controlling the entire force, then why would it be any different on the Invisible Hand than it would be on Mortis? Why would being the
Because
chosen one mean
because
something different?
controlling the force on Mortis means literally being able to ragdoll them.
Why would
Controlling the
that not
force in the
mean the
real
same
world.
thing? Why would that not mean the
Because
same
in the
thing in the
real
real
world,
world?
Emperor Palpatine, that is not what he needs to do in order to control the Force, right? Emperor Palpatine is the son controlling Anakin. In order for Emperor Palpatine to control the dark side, he does not need Anakin to be so powerful as he was on Mortis. He just needs Anakin to be powerful enough to
He
go into the
does,
Jedi
because
Temple
that
and
power,
kill them.
intrinsically, what that power is how many things you're connected to, how much of a convergence you are. So intrinsically, yes, he does need Anakin to be that powerful because he's the crux, the axis of which
Well,
pivots the galaxy.
right, so he needs Anakin to be powerful, but when I say that powerful,
He
I
doesn't need
mean,
him. He doesn't need him to unleash the power because it still works with Vader. You know what I mean? It does. He
well,
doesn't
no,
need to unleash that power. He just needs to.
well, right, but also
He needs
because at
Anakin
that
as
point,
for what he embodies.
Anakin already took care of the Jedi for him. He didn't need Vader anymore because the Jedi were dead. The Emperor had the dark side. The Sith had won, right? The dark side won.
But he did need Vader though
They
because he's alive because of Vader. He's a host on Vader's living force presence. He's dead.
But
Palpatine's dead.
he's always seeking to replace Vader, though, right? Sidious definitely
No,
does not think he needs Vader.
he can get a new host. Definitely, the dark side's already fucked. If he moves on, the universe is already fucked. If he moves on to a new host to sustain his life form, that's fine. But he needed Vader to get it to that point in the first place through controlling his. He needed Vader as the catalyst to make the galaxy that dark, essentially. And what you
Right, but
said, what you said about
the way the galaxy gets that dark is by the Jedi being defeated. Once the Jedi are defeated, right, it doesn't really matter. Like Anakin Anakin is replaceable at that point because the Sith has already won. I don't think Emperor Palpatine even if it's true, they can swap hosts. That sort of also diminishes like the specialness of Anakin, right? You're saying he needed Anakin in order to make this galaxy so dark. But once he does, he can just cast him aside. Which, if you're saying Anakin is this like being who's able to do these ridiculous sorts of things, I think that I don't really think that works, right? Because that means that suppose in Revenge of the Sith, if Anakin defeats Obi-Wan, right? In that case, Emperor Palpatine, he dies, right? So it's not that Anakin is like playing the like the. I'm having a hard time phrasing this. Let me backtrack a little bit. I'm getting a little bit lost in the weeds here. Um, this is too many bong rips in.
Tell me about it.
I also have my Benjamin on me, so that's fun too. Um, Actually, where did I put my card? No, I don't know. Okay, so anyways, what I was saying is the way all this boils down to is essentially I don't. Anakin is a convergence in the Force, but he does not have to be the entire. He does not have to be a convergence of the entire Force in order for him. Sorry, he does not have to be a.
Convergence of the entire Force in order
I
to
I
bring
have to.
about the entire
I
Force,
have to
right?
be careful to delineate this. I have to be careful to delineate this between the cosmic force and the living force. In the
It's
cosmic force,
intertwined. It's fine.
Anakin's presence is a convergence of the entire force, and that's reflected by his fate being intrinsically tied to the fate of the galaxy and the fate of the force at large.
Living Force.
In the living force, though, the living force, the way his power manifests, the way his presence in the living force manifests, has to do with the living world itself, has to do with the place that he's in, right? In the real world, the living force is not as concentrated. It is not a full convergence of the force like it is on Mortis, right? So I think the reason why
The
there was a little
living.
bit of, I think the reason why you were saying basically I don't understand why you're agreeing with all these things but then still not agreeing with what I'm saying. I think I need to be careful to separate when I say Anakin in the cosmic force is absolutely a convergence of the entire force, in that he represents the destiny of the force, or sorry, the fate of the force and the fate of the galaxy. His fate is the same as the fate of the galaxy. But in the living force, and the living force is where, when it comes to how much he's able to TK, how fast he is, the living force, that is dependent on where he is, which is why when he goes to places like Korriban, or when he goes to like light side nexuses, that's why he's able to get more powerful, right? Or for example, like I forgot which book it is. You'll definitely know the one with Yaddle, where he's like, "Wow, I've never felt like so much power before," or whatever. That's why when he's in the presence of these sort of nexuses, he feels more powerful too, because there's a greater concentration of the living force. And in Mortis, it's just that, but it's the entire force. The entire force is so much greater than Yaddle, obviously, right? So he's able to draw on so much more of that.
Okay, so you're saying that on Mortis, there's the whole thing, and then you've got the cosmic force, which he's an embodiment of, and then you've got the living force, right? So
Yeah.
you've got the cosmic force, which you've admitted that he's an embodiment of, in the sense that he's connected to, he's a convergence of all that energy, right?
Yes, intrinsically, that is who
Yeah,
he
yeah,
is.
yeah, yeah. But then you've also got the living force, which is what flows through Mortis, and that does represent the son and the daughter, which is a reflection, as we've established and as you've agreed on, of Anakin's inner state. So you've already agreed that he's an embodiment of both the living and the cosmic force. So what else is there on Mortis that Anakin needs to embody?
Well, hang on a second. I think it's worth noting that, okay, this is going to require backtracking on something I said earlier, but it doesn't fundamentally diverge on my argument. I think we should be careful to say that. I think we should be careful when we say that the son and the daughter and Mortis when Anakin when he's making them bow. I think we should be careful to say that that is exactly the same as, for example, Jason's oneness, because when you read Jason's.
Oh, hello. You've muted. You've muted yourself.
Hey, sorry, my alarm went off and it just disconnected me from the call.
Oh, no worries.
Anyways, so what I was saying is, Anakin, when he's making the son and daughter bow, he is still struggling a little bit. Actually, it's not like he's just saying sit and it's not if you read the Revenge of the Sith novel, you get this vibe that he's almost willing reality to change, like with when he's landing the invisible hand. That's one of the craziest things ever, right? Like every second is impossible, every second that he's doing what he's doing is impossible, but somehow he can just do it because his will is greater than the Force. You get the vibe that he's just able to do it just because he wills it so. In he gives this sort of like omnipotence vibe, like he's above everything because he's written to be above the will of the Force. But in Mortis, there's still this sense of struggling. There's still this, he doesn't get this fully like omnipotent vibe, right? And so what I'm getting at here is that Anakin, even though Anakin is in that moment fully embracing his destiny as the chosen one, and that means he's able to tap into this huge convergence of the living force. It's not necessarily the same as Jason's oneness, because Jason's oneness is literally the entire force flowing through Jason. And in Mortis, when Anakin makes the son and daughter bow, the Mortis, all the energy is still around him, right? It's not all necessarily contained within him. The living force is around him in Mortis. Whereas with respect to Jason, everything is within Jason.
Well, everything's within Anakin as well, but it's also around him because the Force flows
But
through
I
him in
think
multiple different ways, and so all of that convergence is around him and within him on Mortis, and it's fundamentally what Anakin chooses to do, which is defy the Father and choose to use the power of the planet rather than the power from the equivalent power from within himself.
Well, right, but this goes back to what I was saying, right? Where it's weird if, the whole living force, back to the sort of the numbers problem, right? Where somehow the entire living force is an Anakin, but also the entire living force is Anakin plus everything else, right? And so, to me, that's just explicitly not the case with Jason. Jason is, in fact, he's not even everything of the Force at first, right? He ramps up, right? At first, he's not as powerful as he gets. He's super, super strong, of course, but Onami, or he starts powering up or catching up. I can't remember exactly what happens, but Jason does get stronger, right? So to me, it's weird to say that it can be the case that all of the force, all of the living force specifically, is on Mortis and within Anakin at the same time. Because the living force that's on Mortis is by definition a sum of all the life force that's in Mortis. And Anakin is some of the life force there. And if Anakin has all, you see what I'm getting at?
So if the life force can flow through the galaxy and to Mortis, why can it not also flow through Anakin and Mortis at the same time? Why can there not be?
So it's the cosmic force that flows through Anakin and Mortis in the real world at the same time. But the living force is dependent on what's actually in that realm, that reality, right? And so I think like one thing is, if Anakin were truly the entire force, it wouldn't make sense for him to have anything less than like an infinite midichlorian count, because The way midichlorian counts are presented to us, they seem like a gauge for how much of the force you can touch. And Anakin's, while exceedingly high, is still quantifiable. It doesn't literally just say infinity.
Well, we don't know that. It's not confirmed. They just say it's over 20,000, which is where the scale stops. So it could be infinity.
Actually, yeah, that's a really good point.
Yep.
That's a really good point. But the point being, nonetheless, though, I think in order for Anakin, midichlorians are physical things, right? In order for Anakin to have infinite midichlorians, which is he would have to have in order to be able to use all of the living force at once, he would have to be just this infinitely sized person, because midichlorians are,
Well,
again,
if the living
literal
force is
things.
quantifiable by living things, why does his midichlorian counts have to be infinite?
Because what I'm saying is his midichlorian count has to be infinite if he's able to use the entire living force, like in like that realm, in that real world,
Well, why
right?
does
So
his
in Mortis,
midichlorian count
so what
have
I'm
to be
saying is,
infinite
even in Mortis,
if the midichlorian count has to be unquantifiable, then why does the midichlorian count have to be unquantifiable if the living force is quantifiable by the amount of living things? Why can't it be the equivalent quantability, whatever the fucking word would be? You know what I mean?
so that's actually a good point. That's actually a very good point. I'm gonna give you that one. That's a very good point. That very nice. Actually, that's really nice job. That turned my own argument around on me. Nice, good one. I will concede. I will concede that point.
Yeah.
Um, so okay, let me think about how to reframe this then. I hope you don't feel like I'm being disingenuous or
No, no,
arguing
no,
only for
no,
the sake
no.
of
This is
arguing.
this is
I
great.
genuinely, I'm
This is
having a
great.
really great conversation.
Yeah, me
Yeah,
too.
this is great. I'm really having a good time. Um, so let me think.
I'll give you a clue. I'm right.
Right. Um, so yeah, okay. I think to get this down to the roots that I think still are fine and still make sense to me, and are not contradicted by my own words.
Yeah,
um,
of course.
Scrap the whole midichlorian point. The point is more so that if the living force, exists in some quantifiable amount in the galaxy, um, the connection that makes it so that Anakin is a representation of the Force comes not from those numbers, but from the cosmic force, which the cosmic force can't really be quantified. There's no number because the cosmic force entails time, right? It's the past, present, future. It's everything. The cosmic force of anything is infinite, right? Um, because of that, the cosmic force essentially represents like the meta of things, like the narrative of Star Wars itself. That is basically what the cosmic force is on some level, right?
Yeah, so the living
Um,
force is the water in a river, and the cosmic force is the river basin.
right. So it depends on what river you're in when it comes to being able to use. No, I shouldn't use the river example. I don't like where that leads me. But I think because it's the cosmic force that links them all together, and it's the living force that matters when it comes to how powerful they are in the moment. I don't think it has to be, the living force that's on Mortis is super, super dense. It's the convergence. The son and daughter are these special beings that have the entire light side and dark side with them. And the light side and dark side exist in the living force. And so, by definition, Mortis is this place where all the force converges because the son and daughter are there, right? There is, when Anakin in the real world, there is no son and daughter because there is no one being that can absorb all those numbers, right? If you think about like Vitiate, for
What
example,
about Anakin?
Vitiate is so powerful,
Who they
huh?
are? What about Anakin? Who they are a direct reflection of?
Well, so 1 second. So 1 second. Um, the how do I describe this? Vitiate, for example, he's so powerful because he's absorbing so many numbers from so many people, right? I mean, that's his whole thing, right? He does a bunch of rituals and he gets a lot of numbers. That's why he's really powerful. It's whatever, right?
Aye.
Uh, Anakin perhaps has really, really high numbers, but and he can and when his mind is unshielded, he's able to use more of those numbers within him. And when he's in a nexus, the living force that's around him is more dense, so he's able to draw from that more as well, right? So that is to me what Mortis is. On Mortis, the number within Anakin doesn't necessarily change, but the numbers that are around Anakin, the flow of the force of the living force itself, that becomes super high, right? So, for example, this is a weird way to think about it, but in the real world, if you said the living force, the average density of the living force is one per like square foot, right? Something like that. In Mortis, it would be like a gazillion per square foot. And because it's so much higher, that number within Anakin itself doesn't need to change. All that's changing is the density around him, and he's able to draw on more of that.
Okay, but
And the number around him is fueled by the entity like the son and daughter. So, with respect to bring it back to you pointed out the son and daughter reflections of his own inner darkness and lightness. The living force and the cosmic force are still tied in that the events of the living force. Uh, um, it's hard to describe, but it's a symbiotic relationship between the living force and the cosmic force, right? That Lucas loves symbiosis. That's his whole thing. Everything's symbiotic.
yeah. So
The fate of the force is balance, right? This is the cosmic force will lead to balance, and it's going to be played out by the light
it's
versus dark.
homeostasis.
Um, and so in Mortis, in order to get balance, the light and dark have to literally physically be bent to their knees. And because Mortis is also super, super dense, because of those beings, Anakin, when he's there, is able to use this tremendous power to make them literally bend and control them, right? Because the whole thing in Mortis is that they're literally the son and daughter are literally getting too like restless and getting too active and doing too much. They're hurting his friends, right? They need to literally be controlled, and that is what brings balance to Mortis. Or the opposite of that is that they all die. That's like
Yeah.
like an emptiness, if that makes sense. Was that your roommate that just walked by?
Yeah, yeah. He's playing
Just hear you
Borderlands
talk
next to
about
me.
Star Wars all the time.
Yeah, he's sat next to me playing Borderlands the whole time.
That's awesome. I love it. Yeah, my roommates would always see me texting on like Discord about Star Wars or hear me like debating people. It's so funny. Anyways,
But yeah,
anyways.
so wouldn't we've already established, right, that the power on Mortis is the equivalent of the power within Anakin. So I'm not quite sure what your contention is when again
So
you seem to be agreeing
what I'm
with everything I'm saying.
what I'm saying is the events of what happens on Mortis are a reflection of what happens to Anakin and a reflection of what happens to the galaxy and
Yeah,
what a reflection of what happens to the Force.
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
But that and how the fate of all of those things is the same, but with respect to uh, uh, um, the level at which it happens, right? So the fate of Anakin is balance. The fate of the galaxy is balance. The fate of Mortis is balance, and the fate of the Force is balance, right? But these and that balance is achieved. The balance is achieved at it's it's hard to describe, but like the balance is achieved by this by simultaneously the same thing and but like different levels of its consequence, if that makes sense, right? So within Anakin, right, the balance for Anakin that is achieved by him becoming selfless, him letting go, right? That the balance for the galaxy is achieved by
Oh,
off again. Can you hear me?
yeah,
Can you hear me?
yeah. The
My
balance of the
alarm just went
galaxy
off again.
achieved
Sorry.
by.
Yeah, sorry. The balance of the galaxy um, is achieved when Anakin defeats Emperor Palpatine and frees the galaxy and all its people from the oppression of the Empire. Right. That is caused by Anakin. Anakin's selfless act, which is how he gets to balance, right? But what I'm saying is all of those, like that chain of events, that is Anakin's presence in the cosmic force. That's why he's so significant. Because everything, the way he leads things to balance is through being able to let go of himself and be completely selfless rather than
Not
being able to literally.
necessarily. The way he can wield that power is dependent on whether he can let go, and that is how he's going to physically kill the Sith. But the way in which he's. How do I phrase this? The way in which he brings balance is not through wielding the power, it's through intrinsically being the power. So he doesn't need, it's like before when I was talking about the Jedi needed to die, right? Anakin doesn't necessarily need to surrender to align with the Force's will because he is the Force's will, and this is apparent in Revenge of the Sith novel. But he is that, so he doesn't need to surrender like Jason does, because it's a distinction between being balance and reaching balance. And Anakin is the balance, so he decides what balance is for that point in time. So that all depends on a constant current of the entire Force running through him at that one time. And that is consistent with Daoism, because the Dao is always within you, right? And it's the Dao that he is the Dao. He doesn't surrender to the Dao, he represents the Dao. So he is the flow, decides the flow, decides the river basin. Because he's exactly the same as the father. There's no difference between the father and Anakin whatsoever.
I mean, so remember the famous opening lines of Dao De Qing, which, humble flex, I read that in the original Chinese. The opening lines of that book is the Dao that can be named is not the Dao, right? And so I think that really fundamentally actually gets at what I'm saying here, because Anakin is a representation of the cosmic force and the Force and everything, right? The Force is the Tao, right? That's the analogy here, right? The Force, when everyone talks about the Force, even Anakin would say the Force is this huge, wide, like beautiful thing. Yoda would say that. Obi-Wan would say that. Anakin doesn't appreciate it as much. Excuse me. Anakin doesn't appreciate that as much, but he certainly, thinks that.
He's kind of an atheist, which ties into the whole thing. He doesn't necessarily follow any sort of religion, Force religion. He's kind of just an atheist.
He sort of. I think the main thing is that he follows his.
He is the religion.
He follows his own will, yeah. But that again, him being willful and him following his own will is a reflection of the fact that he is on the cosmic level, like the will of the Force, right? But on a personal level, on the living level, on the level of the living force, that is about his personhood and his character and what he does, rather than, you know, exactly how much power he's able to wield, I guess, is how I would put it. There
But
was something else
okay,
I
so
wanted to say, but it's slipping my
there's a
mind.
difference, because when you say the Tao that can be named is not the Tao, that is true in Taoism. But Star Wars is a mix between Taoism and other philosophies as well. Other philosophies that do that, like shamanism and stuff, that have these celestial nodes, these axis points, like the axis mundi, which are real, tangible, nameable things, which are symbolic of the Tao, but they're just a different way of looking at it, to where these different philosophies put the Tao into these nodes, these convergence points. Taoism doesn't
Right.
do
So
that, but Star Wars
I
does,
think
as
that's
it mixes other
I think
philosophies.
I think that's definitely true. It makes there it has to be the case, right? Because Taoism doesn't give you powers, right? In Star Wars, if
And
you're a
Mortis
Jedi, you get
exists.
powers,
Mortis exists, right? That's nameable.
and so what I would say is, how do I put this? Man, I'm like I've been walking in circles around this pillar in my apartment, just talking about Star Wars for like it's been like 2 hours, dude. This is so great.
I just been saying, no, it's good.
Um,
It's good to have a proper convo about it though, because
yeah,
it's
yeah,
hard to get a
yeah,
convo. It's
yeah,
hard to get a convo. It's in suspect and say, bro.
yeah, for sure. Okay, so let me think. It is true that there's obviously a difference between the Force and Taoism, because the Force gives you powers.
It's the same
Um,
thing, just meshes it with other stuff.
right, but I think
Expands it.
I think the one thing that the Star Wars does very differently is make this distinction between the cosmic force and the living force. Taoism doesn't have that. The Tao is just everything.
Well, the
There's
Taoism
just
does,
no
I think. I'm pretty sure the Taoism
there's no
does.
such distinction, right?
Yeah,
Um, I
because
think
go on.
the fact that there is a distinction allows us to say that Anakin represents the Tao with respect to this other thing, which is the living force, and that's determined by and the living force that he's able to use, how much power he's able to actualize, depends on it depends on how much he needs in order to fulfill his destiny and achieve balance, not only for himself but for the force and for the galaxy and everything. So in Mortis, he needs that much power in order to fulfill his destiny, right? That is his destiny on Mortis, to have that power.
And he
in the
does have
real
that power.
world in the real world uh the power he needs is not about how much he can force push, but about how much he can love Luke Skywalker, right? So when you say that he has that power in the real world, or not just love, right? The whole catalyst from love to being able to let go of himself. Um, in that does not demand that he be able to do what he did on Mortis. All that demands from him is being able to love his son, let go of himself, and pick up Emperor Palpatine. Right. In Mortis, he has to be able to ragdoll the son and daughter, who are these incomprehensibly powerful deities, basically.
But are
Um,
also
and because we're able
subsection.
to make a distinction between the cosmic force and the living force, because those are different, we can say Anakin on Mortis and in the real world is the same in the cosmic force, but different in the living force. That's something that that distinction allows us to say that Taoism would not be able to. and I think that's because, for Star Wars, you have to have this source of worldly power, right? How where if the cosmic force is fate in the future, where do the Jedi get their, where does the energy to push something with the force come from? And that's going to be the living force, right? But because we can make that distinction, we can say Anakin in the living force in the real world is distinct from Anakin in the living force on Mortis, where the living force is way denser, but he's still Anakin, so he's the same in the cosmic force. I do have to go like real soon. It's getting real late for me.
That's fine. That's fine.
But so say whatever, and then I think we'll probably leave it at that.
Yeah, of course. So the difference between Anakin in the living force and the cosmic force, he's the embodiment of both, not just of the cosmic force in the real world, but of the living force as well. And I think that is apparent on Mortis because the ones are inherently embodiments of the energy that flows from the universe, and the ones are also reflections of Anakin's inner state, which proves that the ones, as the living force, are also Anakin. So if you've conceded that he is the cosmic force in the universe, you've also indirectly also conceded earlier on that he is the embodiment of the living force as well, because he is the ones as reflections of the living force are also reflections of his inner state. So it's both the cosmic force and the living force that he's embodiment of in the universe as well as outside the universe. And we know this primarily as well because the Father wants him to not use the power that's contained on Mortis, but use the power that's contained in him, which fundamentally would not change across Mortis and the real galaxy, because it's the power within Anakin which the Father wants him to let go of mental cloud and to release from within himself. So it's in the real galaxy, it is both the cosmic and the living force that Anakin embodies, and that is exactly the same as Mortis. That's how I close it up.
All right. Hey man, I had a fantastic time talking with you. This was brilliant. It's not often that I get to nerd out about Star Wars like this, even with people in SI, which is pretty crazy. I don't know. I feel like
they never want a voice chat.
They never want a voice chat, and also I feel like it's talking about Star Wars with like Ethan or like Jake. I feel like it never gets to this level. You know what I mean? Like it never gets this abstract. So to speak. So it's fun to be able to do that. But anyways, bro, I gotta go. I hope you have a fantastic day. I'm gonna get some sleep.